Welcome back to the Sunday Talk Show. This is live here on the Arise News Channel. Now I have with me Professor Anthony Killer, Director, Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies, Professor David Awurawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Today, we've been able to take about 4 topics, packed into 3 major guests on the program. The panelists will now try to look at all the issues that have been raised. The coronation of King Charles III, the issue, the sentencing of the Ekweremados, and also, of course, the ways and means crisis that Dr. Boniface Chizia says President Buhari has taken a wise decision on by getting the approval, in quotes. I don't know whether the National Assembly has the powers under the laws of the country to approve anything with regard to ways and means. And then, of course, electric cars coming to the streets of Lagos, electric buses. Lagos State government saying very soon we will have electric buses on the road. Well, Yemi Adamolekun, let me start with you.
All right. Let's see. We can start with King Charles. A rainy, as someone that was interviewed said, a rainy British afternoon. What better way to do a British ceremony than on a rainy day? But I think for me, 3 things I would say struck me. One, I think the very sort of personal moment, the 2 times that Prince William had to go and talk to him, see him, pledge allegiance. I thought that was quite, and you could see the smile on the king's face, both touching moments. I thought it was very interesting. I think some comments around people not really liking him. I mean, he's certainly never going to be his mom. He's not going to have the kind of time that his mom had in 70 years to build a following, to build relationships. So I don't think he should try, really, quite frankly. But I was encouraged to see people come out in the rain, come to sort of celebrate, despite the fact that there are some people who don't believe in the monarchy. But I thought that was really very interesting. And I thought a very interesting note as well, the 3rd point, will be the Archbishop of Canterbury. So King Charles says he's a defender of the faiths, plural, but the monarchy is very tied to the Anglican faith. And the Archbishop of Canterbury was very clear when he was reading his oath, said the defender of the faith. And I thought that was a very interesting, kind of interesting in focus, at least for him as the Archbishop of Canterbury. Let's see, Ekweremadu. 3 things. As the ambassador said, I mean, the chronology is known to most. I do agree with the ambassador that the timing of the request for mercy with a congratulatory message to the king was not appropriate for Mr. Ajulo. Congratulate him and then maybe wait for, 6 months, a year, and then say, oh, by the way, now that you've settled into your new role, would you mind looking at this? I mean, I like the fact that he did the research, and I like the fact that he said he wanted the law to take its course, and then, rather than those who had written letters during the course of the proceedings. I understand there were 51 pages total of different requests that came before the court. Secondly, I thought the daughter's interview was ill-timed. I understand, I'm not quite sure what her handlers were trying to achieve. You could hear her being coached in terms of what to say, what not to say, what question to respond to. She hesitated on certain things. And her story also had holes that were also pretty glaring. So I wasn't quite sure what the objective of the interview was. To apologize to her parents, she could have done that privately. There was nothing she shared that we didn't already know. She said she disagreed with the judgment and said she was biased, understandably. But what part did you disagree with? If you agree that what they did was illegal, what part of the judgment did you disagree with? So didn't really get that. And lastly, ways and means, I think, would be my last point. Actually, no, ways and means, and then we'll talk about electric vehicles. I think the point that you were trying to push with Dr. Boniface was that an illegal act was committed. And so, I mean, yes, in this Buhari administration where anything goes, impunity is rife. What is more disturbing to me, I mean, the money has been spent. Yes, the money has been spent. But on what, number one? Nobody has provided. And I think at some point that was meant to be the condition for the National Assembly securitizing the debt, which the documents never came forward. But then secondly, Godwin Emefiele and the CBN committed an illegal act. So Emefiele has a year left on his tenure. Are we just going to shrug and be like, as Dr. Boniface basically did, it's been done, we've spent the money, let's keep it moving? So what message are we, well, I mean, the message we've been sending under this administration is that anything goes, impunity is allowed. But it's just really very disturbing to see that happen. And then you have your highest legislative body basically rubber stamping an illegal act without any sort of recourse to, I mean, even if you were going to do it for the sake of the country, shouldn't there be, okay, the person who did it will be penalized in this way, and then we'll have to do it because the country has to something or the other. And you're securitizing a debt, I'm just going to leave that. So yeah, that is really quite problematic. And then the last point about Funsho Doherty's open letter. This will be Funsho Doherty's second open letter since the gubernatorial elections ended. He wrote one about collapsed buildings in Lagos, the trend of it, and the fact that no one is being held accountable. And he is right. He wrote the open letter. Nobody has responded. The recent one, actually no, there was one in, I believe, Agege after the one in Banana Island. None of those buildings, as far as I know, have the builders or the people who signed off on it, both in government and those who actually own the buildings, not that I'm aware of as anyone being held accountable. But on this particular letter, and I think this one's particularly also important because it's very similar to what happened with the Lekki-Ekpe Expressway. So that started out off as a PPP, and then Lagos State invariably bought the debt. So Lagos State now owns Lagos-Ekpe Expressway, and the whole notion about PPP has gone poof, more or less. Documents not to be found, a lot of controversy about who owns. And I remember this particularly because of the NSAS case, where Lagos State was trying to make the case that we need to collect money because we have to pay back a debt because we borrowed money. And we're like, well, but on the floor of the State House of Assembly on so and so date, you took it back. So what exactly are you talking about? And so Mr. Doherty's point is that you can't continue to do things like this when there are clear laws in Lagos State that says if you're going to do this with people's money, you have to make your documents public. They haven't done that, and everybody's celebrating. Dr. Boniface said, oh, it's a pilot phase. We'll see. No, before you get into the pilot phase, we should have clear documents that says this is why this is, this is why this is, this is why this is. And interestingly, I think probably very deliberately, Mr. Doherty did not include in his letter the fact that Oando is about to be delisted, which will be very interesting, and then we won't have access to its books.
Well, Professor Kila, good to see you again on the program.
Good to be here. Where do we start from? The coronation, or better still, the United Kingdom, who's sort of gained central stage of the world generally, because I think the coronation was reported by 98% of the media in the world. The center of the world in Nigeria in particular, because the same week we also had the sentencing of Ike Kemeradi. So let's stay in London and see the world. But the coronation sort of reiterates the centrality of the monarch in Britain and allows it to present itself as the kingdom, as a country that has the oldest and most relevant kingdom in the world, because that is what the British monarchy has become. The coronation has been designed to re-emphasize this point. And it is important for those of us who are loyalists or traditionalists to learn from the fact that the British monarchy is not just the repository of tradition, but it's also the mark of excellence, the custodian of values, and the ability to stand as a symbol of unity, not partisan, not sectional, not factional. King Charles states that he's going to be the defender of faith because that is the new legacy of the monarchy, to go beyond what his mom was able to do. People are worried if King Charles will live up to that legacy. I say he would he can't outlive his mom because that was king she was on the throne for impossible number of years, difficult to outlive. But I think he's the most prepared king in the world. Let us put that way. For a long time, for decades, he was preparing for this role. And he's somebody who understands this. And I have a lot of hope that he's going to live up to that expectations. With the regardless of the personal trials they've had in a world that is having a lot of social revolution, the British monarchy has been able to anchor itself to remain relevant and still authoritative. And there's another thing to be said. A system where one person is being coronated and some people are protesting, there's another fascinating thing that is not highly reported, which is the fact that all across the land, while the event was happening in London, all across the land, there were events everywhere. Every school, every church, every society, every community was doing one thing or the other. Whether it was a special dinner in a pub or it was a choir singing in a village, everybody had something going on. So it is really a Commonwealth moment. So one person is being coronated, but the whole of England that was celebrating itself. And I think that's a crucial thing. There's a lesson to be learned, still remaining in London, from the sentencing of Senator Ike Kurumada, which, let me say from the onset, I tweeted at some point that what happened to him, I'm drawn to sympathy, because I cannot really in conscience and knowledge say I will not be tempted to commit the crime he has committed to save a child. There is a big human factor there. But one thing we've learned from the British justice, from the reading of that sentence, you would think the judge is looking at each one of us everywhere in the world and telling us why he has decided this way. You can really see justice at play. You can really see that the sentence read more than once. He said, I disagree with the counsel. I disagree with the defense. You can really see point by point that you will really see that, yes, every point has been thought through and every point has been deliberated, and this is justice. The senator was charged for lying, for trying to benefit from a false act. It is possible to pull out the human factor there, but the reason for his condemned for it being convicted is very clear and logical. I say this because in Nigeria we have a lot of court cases, not less the one coming for the judicial trial, the electoral trials now. And this is the kind of thing we need to emulate, so that when justice is done in Nigeria, let it be clear. As you see, I'm leaving aside the idea of big man and no big man, where justice is equal for law. We're all equal before the law. It is not, some people say, when we say this thing sometimes, some people think it's theoretical. It is not theory. This is that kind of law in practice. By a very simple man who spoke very clearly. You cannot say you didn't understand him. And if you don't, the text was even there. It was subtexted. And really, you really have to have something wrong with you not to understand how they arrived at their verdict. So I think our bench, our lawyers should look at that favor that this case has done us. And, to the request for clemency, yes, I totally agree with you, Mr. Mandela. The timing is something that leaves one a bit. I think it's not the right time. But I think it's a cultural thing, or perhaps a value thing. We've lost the sense of what is the right time to say this. I say this because people who know you after 2 minutes beg you for money in Nigeria. Perhaps it's that mindset that we don't know that certain things are not appropriate anymore. And it's time to rediscover that, starting from issues like this. To the economy, here we are. This thing about loan. Dr. Boniface, he's tired. You think he's saying he should just let it go. Because there are too many strange things going on in the country and one gets tired. This is what I would propose. I would say, one, it is true, that loan is not a new thing. They've requested it before. They're just reiterating it. My position will be moving forward. This is what we need to do. Anytime a loan is secured, let those asking for the loan show us how they're going to pay it before they take it at all. And the people granting them loan as well, I think they should need to look at that. Just as we do in our private life, if you go to a bank, to a lender to ask for money, they ask you how you're going to pay it back. We should transfer that basic principle of economics to public financing to say that when you say you want to use money for a bridge, show me how that bridge is going to generate income to pay it back. That is why it's called capital expenses, because capital causes interest and profit. If that specific thing you're building is so social that it cannot generate income, show me where else that income is going to come from. And I think that's what we need to do. By the same token, and those who spend Commonwealth Fund, I think it's time, I will make a case, we start making it criminal. If you sit in an office and money disappears, whether it's 50 years later I think your estate should be liable the day we come back to realize that you're not accountable for it. And I think that is the kind of way we need to start thinking now, because Dr. Ruben Abachi did something scary. Maybe it's a sadist, I don't know. Underlining the fact that the whole country is going to be in debt for 40 years. I jumped from my chair when I heard it. That is the famous debt of the unborn. He might be wicked, but it's a fact. That is what is going on, that we're going to be in that kind of trouble. To Lagos State, anything that will decongest is welcomed. That is my first thing to that. Now, the idea of bringing cars, why the government will be investing in cars for people, I think is very, shall we say, innovative. That's kind of way to solve our problem. We need to look at that. But I do believe, though, that contrary to what we think, whether Mr. Doherty is playing politics or not, what we need to see is what he's saying. Are they true and are they relevant? Should be the true questions we should be asking them. And I think the Lagos State government should answer those questions point by point.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Anthony Kila. Let me now go to Professor Awurawa. Incidentally, we don't have Professor Akintenwa, a very regular panelist with us today. Professor Akintenwa is now a visiting professor at the Achievers University in Owo. But, his people at Achievers University in Owo should know that Professor Akintenwa also has obligations on this program. They should not monopolize him, but it's okay. They have grabbed him to come and help them set up their international relations department. But we also need him here in Lagos. So we'll be sharing him. Professor Awurawa, we are glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're very, swift on the coronation of King Charles III. Two issues. Beyond being defender of the faith, and it has been, emphasized over and over, I would like to stretch it beyond that to comments he made regarding being fair, being just, being inclusive. It needs to be fair, it needs to be just, it needs to be inclusive. That is the only way we'll be successful as king. Because the world has grown, the world has expanded, the world has become more sophisticated. People now know their rights now more than at any time in human history. So it's only when it's fair, just, and equitable, and inclusive that he will be successful. Don't also forget the fact that he's not just the head of the United Kingdom, he's also head of the Commonwealth. Very diverse, 54 countries. And so only when he's able to uphold and keep to those promises made that he will be successful as the British monarch. The second point I want to emphasize is the fact that the United Kingdom is a liberal democratic state. The same as United States of America, the same as France, the same as Canada, and several other countries. But it has a monarch. Whereas in the United States, we have the president, vice president, and the rest. In France, the prime minister, the president. In the United Kingdom, is the monarch and the prime minister. The monarch being head of state, the prime minister being head of government. We have a lot to learn from that arrangement. Nigeria is supposed to be also a democratic state. We need to craft our own, structure of government to speak to our peculiarity. Take, for instance, just a recent constitutional amendment, we had this stated that a president, governor must appoint his cabinet within 3 months of being sworn in. Unlike what we had in the Buhari government, it came in and for 6 months there was no. Nigeria mirrors the United States presidential system of government, but in Nigeria, we have a Senate president, unlike in the United States, where the vice president doubles. We need peculiarities that speak to our own need. Just like the United Kingdom has a monarch, has the head of government, the prime minister, function like that. Take, for instance, also the issue of this controversy regarding why do you swear in somebody that court cases are still hanging. These are things we can refine in our own way. That maybe before somebody is sworn in, all cases must be tidied up, so that this controversy, or you have sworn in somebody, you are either a fait accompli, which is why people are saying, oh, somebody will not be sworn in and all that. You know, peculiarities that speak to our own needs, so that we can also have a stable democracy like other countries of the world. On the case of Ekweremadu, we said a whole lot about it. So I think the sentence, I think it is harsh. It's almost 10 years. And for the wife, 4 years, 8 months, almost 5 years. I think the judge could have been more lenient, considering, just like Professor Kela said, the circumstances. Wanted to do it for his daughter. And the young man was not bundled from Lagos into the plane and taken to the United Kingdom. It was negotiated. The young man agreed, got there, and then certain things, developed, and he did what he did. So with all of that, I thought that the judge would be a little more lenient. Everybody agrees that he committed the offense. And I'm really appalled that, they agreed to make documents to suggest that David, the young man, is in some way a cousin to Sonia, to the family, which is not true. But despite all of that, I thought that the judge would be a little more lenient than he was. I agree with Ambassador Chinade that there's a whole lot that can be done quietly underground. We hope that the government does that, so that moving forward, hopefully, it might come out earlier than what the sentence he has pronounced. But like Professor Kela also said, justice must be delivered fairly in a condign fashion. The offense and then the sanction for the offense and all that. Ways and means. Well, we say that also so many times. One thing we must emphasize is this: government needs to be responsible. It would have been illegal for anybody to stop the government, really, except the CBN governor. Because this particular loan was not taken from China or the IMF or the World Bank. It's from the CBN. The president appoints the CBN governor. He's there at the mercy of the CBN, of the president. So it's only when you have a very radical and self-willed CBN governor who say, no, these are the things, these are the laws. We shouldn't break the law. But of course, we know that in our climate, such is rare to come by. So what we should be emphasizing is that government should be responsible. It's not just enough to come and say, oh, we keep to the law, we are honest, we are transparent. Because the government came in with that philosophy, with that claim that, oh, they will clean the urgent table, we are honest, we are straightforward, and see what we are saying. The law clearly broken. That's why Dr. Chizia it was like he was emasculated. That what can we possibly do? The government has broken the law. The easiest way around it is to securitize it, and that's what the government, the parliament has done. So responsibility on the part of those in government is what we should emphasize moving forward, and we hope that the new government coming in will further pay attention to that. The debts are from 12 trillion in 2015 to 77 trillion in 2023. There's never been any time in Nigeria's history that we have had this exponential rise in our debt, profile. And that is what the new government needs to pay attention to, so that what we should be doing how to reduce the debts and not further expanding.
Can I add something really quickly? Okay.
The fact that we've had an exponential rise in expenditure, in debt, is that we've not had an exponential rise in production.
Yeah.
We have not seen increase in numbers of cars, numbers of houses, numbers of jobs.
So what do we spend the money on?
What did we spend the money on? Yeah. That's the sad bit that we need to look at. I think we need to have like an office of quality assurance or a governance tribunal for people in government to know that there's some crimes you can commit only where you're in government, and should be looking at those kind of crimes, whether it's abuse of office, whether it's looting funds, anything that is peculiar to the office you hold.
Can I add something quickly on the time in office? So the judge said for Ekweremadu, he will spend 2/3 of the sentence in prison and the rest on an ankle tag. He also said it should include the time he's already spent in custody. The sentence was 1 year after he was arrested, so he will spend roughly 4 years once you take account of the factors and how the prison years are counted. For his wife, he gave her 4 years, but she had spent 234 days on a tag. He halved that and removed 117 days from her sentence and said she will spend half in prison and the other half on an ankle tag, so she'll be out by next year. So by the time you count those days, it's not as, I'm just saying that it's not as bad as the 10 years that was announced. Why are you laughing?
So no mess is needed.
I'm just clarifying that it's not 10 years. That's all.
It's not even about the number of days. In criminal jurisprudence, What matters is the fact of conviction.
Conviction, exactly.
Once you've been convicted,
Yes, consequences.
justice is seen to have been done. And when the matter goes on appeal, the appellate court may decide one way or the other. And I assume that the, counsel to the query matters will go on appeal. But in any case, let's take our fifth topic and final topic of the day. Hudu Yunusa Ari, the suspended resident electoral commissioner of Adamawa State, has been granted bail after 3 days in police custody. Yunusa Ari was arrested over the controversial role he played in the recent governorship election in the state, when against the provisions of the Electoral Act, he was deemed to have usurped the powers of the returning officer by declaring Senator Aisha Binani Dairo of the All Progressives Congress as winner of the election, midway into the collation of results. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, had overruled him on that declaration and summoned him to the commission's headquarters in Abuja, but he went into hiding. Well, let me come back to you to start off this, Professor Awurawo. Finally, Yunusa Ari, the man who introduced Huduism into Nigeria's electoral process, has been arrested by the police and interrogated, is now on bail. Big relief, or we should be asking for justice to set an example?
Well, he has only been granted bail. We will expect that he would appear to face trial, and then the judge will rule one way or the other in line with the offense he has committed. He could have plunged the country into chaos. If we are just fortunate that he was not the one that had the responsibility to announce the result. If by chance he had been the returning officer, it would have been more complicated for INEC to handle, and the whole place must have been plunged into crisis. Because they were trying to build on that by saying that the result has been announced and it is final. Let us now go to court. Fortunately, he wasn't the one authorized to announce the result. It was easy for INEC to wriggle out of it. When I commented on it a fortnight ago, I said, you think to me vacuous, puerile, just come out, no specific figures. You just come out and say you have announced a winner when half of the results have not been collected. And I asked, what was he trying to achieve? And it just this thinking that there is impunity in the land. Just announce and then go to court. Fortunately, reason prevailed. INEC waded in and then, So he has to have his day in courts. He has only been granted bail. This should not be the end of the matter. And of course, the other day, the Bauchi State Governor said, the Adamawa State Governor said he will pursue the case to a logical conclusion. We hope that this will pursue a logical conclusion to serve as a deterrent to characters like this, who don't even have a sharp mind to know that the whole exercise will be in futility.
Yemi.
Just a bit to buttress that point. INEC, even if he had announced it, INEC had 7 days to overturn it. And that's an important point to make, because that's why a lot of citizens are upset with how INEC managed the presidential elections and a number of other elections. The law gives you 7 days. So if people were complaining and you saw clear irregularities, you didn't have to announce a result, or even if you did for whatever reason, you could have reviewed it in 7 days. There's no need to be in a hurry to. And I think one of the things for me that we should take away from the Rex actions is his boldness. Like, whoever it was that gave him the assurance that he could make that announcement and he would maybe be covered, that needs to be really interrogated. Because he rolls in, as you said, makes the announcements, tells the police commissioner or whoever it was that was assigned to him, and he leaves the state. He leaves the state before INEC officials, the other INEC officials, and then goes into hiding. He was supposed to report back to INEC office headquarters, and they now started complaining, we haven't seen him, we haven't heard from him. Then he writes a 3-page letter rambling on God knows what. And it took, but at least one thing we should say is that the police did arrest him, because Nigeria being Nigeria, they literally could have said, we can't find him. And then we will still be, exactly. Or administration to change and just say, oh, we can't find him. But we'll see. It's one thing he was arrested. They've released him now. I guess the next point is what happens next.
Professor Kila?
But I think everybody agrees that what the man has done is a very strange thing, really out of the box situation. But we've all talked about the electoral part of it. We've talked about the criminal part of it. I think we should include the sanity.
I think you can't get off in claiming what's it called?
No, it's not for him. It's for the rest of us. It is public mental hygiene.
Right.
I think, in a way, when people do things that are very strange, for the sanity of the rest of us, we could consider it as insane. Not to let him off the hook, but to treat his case as really strange case. So, like, for example, somebody who announced that kind of result, then disappeared, then he was arrested. I think it is wrong to just let him go home after 3 days. I think they should take him to somewhere to debrief him, like somebody captured by extraterrestrial forces, to say, we want to see what has happened to you, or,
But do you really think it's that odd in the country that we live in, that people can just do whatever they want?
For us to, that's the public mental hygiene thing. For us to remain sane, we have to start having boundaries to say, beyond this, we should not go.
Right.
So if you start singing a song that does not exist inside the house, we can leave you. But the moment you want to start going out naked, we should start saying, no, don't go beyond that. So even in our criminality, our rascality, I argue that we should put a limit to it. And he has gone beyond that limit.
Well, fair point.
Well, thank you, Professor Kila. Looks like we can take just one more topic quickly. Number 6. Another 130 Nigerian evacuees from Sudan on Friday arrived in Abuja in what has now become the second batch of a government-assisted evacuation exercise. They touched down at Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, aboard an aircraft belonging to Taco Air at about 3 p.m. Nigerian time. A first batch of 376 evacuees had been flown in late Wednesday night in aircraft belonging to Air Peace and the Nigerian Air Force. According to Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, there are about 1,700 Nigerians awaiting evacuation in Sudan. And I understand that today more persons have also arrived. Yemi, you are happy now?
About
Last week you were very critical.
No, I mean, my criticism wasn't about evacuation or not. My criticism was about the fact that the chairman of Air Peace needs to pay attention to his local operations. There's one thing to be offering philanthropic support, which might or might not be supported by the government financially. There's another thing to run your operations in the country, giving respect to people who actually pay money to fly on your airlines. And my position hasn't changed.
Prof, quickly, briefly.
Well, 3 quick issues. One, interagency cooperation. Obviously, it was not neat between the Diaspora Commission, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then those in charge of humanitarian inactivity. I mean, they had conflicts which negatively affected the smooth, operation of bringing the Nigerians back. Second, acting promptly. When others were taking steps to do something, Nigeria did nothing. And, that created that crisis. And then third, Nigeria's place in Africa. How can Egypt say Nigerians can't come into Egypt? How can Egypt say Nigerian planes can't land? Whatever has happened to Pan-Africanism? Those are things that, concern, that I see that are not quite neat with the arena. But we thank God, those batches, 2 batches are here, that everybody will be eventually brought into the country safely. Then everybody will be happy.
Professor Kila.
Well, very quickly, I think the interagency thing is a huge thing, which I think the incoming government should make an agenda to see how we can have better running of interagency issues. Nigeria's place in Africa, this is disastrous at the moment, to put it very lightly, because never mind Pan-Africanism, what we were brought up to believe is that Nigeria is a country of how dare you to us. I think we need somebody, a new Home Affairs, Foreign Affairs Secretary, that will develop the sense of how dare you to Nigeria and really make it happen there. But of course, the first way to do it is to protect your citizens and make your passports and their lives worthy of something. And I really want to say shame on those who have led Nigeria to this point to allow Nigerian citizens to be so much in Sudan. I've been to Sudan. What are Nigerians doing in Sudan? To have so much people. I think we need to start asking ourselves these questions. Those who have led the country to a situation where Nigerians would rather be in Sudan than be in Nigeria, should really look at themselves in the mirror, and if they have a conscience, let it prick. Otherwise, I'll prick it for them.
What are Nigerians doing in Sudan? I'm sure, Prof, if you go to Tuvalu or Tongas, you'll find Nigerians there. But in any
But the
case.
truth is always, I mean, sorry, just a quick one. Immigration is never an issue, but the issue is let it be by choice. Yeah, exactly.
What are they doing?
Precisely. Not to be
That's the real question.
forced immigration because...
I started having this doubt when when a very important figure of this country was discovered to have studied in Sudan.
Anyway, thank you very much, Professor Anthony Kila, Professor David Aworawo, and Yemi Damoleko. And thank you for watching. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.